Okay, so the hand model of the brain. The hand model of the brain is a way to understand the three main parts of the brain and how they impact our nervous system in a way that's really visual. So you can use your arm and your hand to understand these three basic parts of the brain and just understand that there's way more to the brain than what I'm about to explain. This is a very simplified explanation. So, three parts of the brain. You can think of your wrist and your arm here as your brainstem. And so all of the automatic functions of your nervous system get carried out here in the brainstem. So this is where your circulatory system is managed. It's where your respiratory system is managed, your reproductive system. You don't have to consciously tell your heart to pump blood. You don't have to consciously think, okay, lungs, take a breath now. It just happens. And all of those things are carried out here in the brainstem. This is also where your fight, flight, freeze, tend and befriend, that's another survival response. All of those survival responses are carried out by the brainstem. Okay, so then next, moving up, you can think of your palm as your limbic area. So the limbic area of your brain is right in the middle, right in the center. And this is where all of your emotions are processed. And if you fold your thumb in, this represents the amygdala. So the amygdala is also part of the limbic area or the limbic system. So your amygdala basically is the smoke alarm of your nervous system. And what does a smoke alarm do? Its only job is to sense smoke, essentially to sense danger. And that's exactly what the amygdala does. So its function, I think of it as like a periscope. It's always scanning for danger. It's not looking for that beautiful sunset over there, or it's not trying to find all of those compliments that people are saying about you and noticing them. So it's almost as if our brain is hardwired to notice what's not going well, because it is. So I know a lot of times we can say that, oh man, that person's so negative. Well, it's really easy. It's really easy to be negative because our amygdala, we actually have a part of our brain whose only function is to notice what's not going well and notice those potential dangers around us. The other interesting thing about your amygdala is that it only takes in sensory information. So it's only taking in what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you taste, what you touch, and determining, is that dangerous? Is that scary? Is that a potential threat to this person's life? And if it does sense that threat, then it's going to communicate down to the brainstem that's going to carry out those survival responses. Okay, so next, if you fold your fingers over your thumb, this represents the brain's cortex. So I'm going to go like this. So that outer part of our brain, when you see pictures of the brain, it's that noodly looking thing. That's the cortex. It's what makes us human. So in the cortex, this is where language is processed. This is where rational thinking is processed. This is where we have access to rational thought, logical thought. So if you look even more specifically at the fronts of your fingers here, and if I were to hold this up to my head, thinking about that this orientation is in the correct orientation to my own brain, the fronts of my fingers here represent what's right behind my forehead. And that's referred to as the prefrontal cortex. So that's the part of the cortex that's right here behind your forehead and is in charge of all those things that I just said, but most specifically, all that executive functioning. So timelines, organization, thinking rationally about something, creative problem solving, and again, language. So you can imagine when you're in a state of extreme stress or trauma, we say that our lid is flipped. So we flip our lid. So obviously our brain doesn't actually move like this, but metaphorically, we think about that prefrontal cortex almost disconnecting from the rest of the nervous system, the rest of the parts of the brain. It doesn't happen that way completely, but there is far less access to this part of the brain during a time of stress than there is normally. So we can think of this as when we are out of our resiliency zone, when we're in our high or low zone, that's when our lid is flipped. So we have less access to language, to words, to even thinking about how we feel or what we're thinking in that moment. And it's harder for us to figure how do we get out of this? How do we strategize our way out of this situation and feel better? It's harder to engage in that kind of rational thinking. So a lot of times people talk about shock, right? Being in a state of shock. When people are in a state of shock and you ask them, what happened? What's going on? How are you feeling? It's going to be really hard for them to answer those questions, right? And you see a lot of people doing things that seem really bizarre to other people that have their lids on and have access to that part of their brain, right? Like walking out into a busy street or into a dangerous area, not having appropriate clothing on for the weather. These are all part of our prefrontal cortex that allows us to make rational decisions. So it's really helpful to know when you're here and when your nervous system's here. And it's really good to be able to communicate that to the people around you who also understand this metaphor. So I work at an alternative high school, and this is actually a signal that we have in the school. So if a student is feeling really out of their zone to the point where they might harm themselves or others, and that could be verbally as well, not just physically, or they're just so activated that they can't learn and they can't be in class and they need a break to use a strategy to get back in their zone, they can just go like this to the teacher, and the teacher knows what that means. And then they have a process for going to take that break and do what they need to do, and then come back to the class when their lid is back on and they're ready to learn. So it can be really helpful when your lid is flipped, you don't have access to language, maybe you're not comfortable saying how you feel, or you don't even know how you feel, saying that to other people or in front of other people. This can be a signal that you have that really indicates to other people where you're at. And it gives the people around you an understanding of where you're at. And so that can also change the way they interact with you, and the space that they may or may not give you. So that is the hand model of the brain.